All right, welcome everybody back to the PHLY Sixers podcast. Derek Bodner joined once again by Kyle Neubeck as Devon continues his isolation away from us. How you doing, buddy?
Would you say that Devon is ramping back up in order to rejoin the PHLY Sixers podcast?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He's like James Harden and now Draymond Green.
Look, it just takes a little. He came in after a 3 month absence and played. Had no minutes restriction. It just took a little bit of a wear on him emotionally. Needs a few days away. That's fine. That's fine. We get it, Devon. We can be a bit much. We do have, I don't think we necessarily had this on our agenda. Mostly because we forgot the results came out today.
About All-Star ballot.
we did get some All-Star, the first round of fan voting results from that. So we will have that to talk about. We might talk a little bit about a starting lineup change. We solicited some questions from some mailbags. I assume you would prefer to start with the All-Star stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big headline today. If there's news, then that is it. Certainly other stuff for us to discuss, but for anybody who somehow missed this today, I can tell you what the exact results are. So in the Eastern Conference front court, we have Giannis in first with about 2.1 milli. Joel Embiid, number 2, in line to start. No surprise, 1.8 mil. And Jason Tatum at 3 in the front court, about 1.7.5-ish million. So I think that's pretty fair. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like no real arguments with those guys being the front court starters. And then you go to the back court. I don't know that these guys are that contentious. Halliburton, number 1 by a considerable margin, which if the NBA wants to take any victory laps on the in-season tournament, I think that's probably what they would point to.
Raise his profile.
The profile boost that Halliburton got being in that tournament. He's first by quite a bit, with about 1.4 million, little under 1.4 million. Dame Lillard at second, slightly under $1 million. And then the next two, particularly the next one, is where I have some problems. Trae Young at 3, at a little under 900,000. Donovan Mitchell, 624,000. Tyrese Maxey at 5th, 480,062 votes. And here would be my case for our friend, I won't say friend of the podcast, let's say colleague of the podcast. I don't know how we would even.
We're talking about Tyrese?
Yeah.
Just
associate of the podcast.
I don't know.
Tyrese, here's what I would say to make his case over, look, I think it's going to be hard pressed to beat out Dame in a popularity contest. I'm certainly not going to say he's outright better than Halliburton, who's having an incredible season.
No, I think Halliburton should be the number 1 vote.
As the number 1 guy.
Right. Yep.
I think Tyrese has a case against any of the other guys. The one that bothers me is Trae Young, who I will preface this by saying Trae's stats are great. Individually, having an excellent season as the number 1 option in Atlanta. I also think you can directly tie Atlanta being as mid or bad.
Mid? They're the 27th defense in the league.
Okay.
Yeah.
As bad as they are to Trae Young. And I would say that on both sides of the floor, right? Like he's an insanely gifted offensive player. Stats are undeniable, but the fit with DeJounte Murray in many ways has not worked because of Trae Young's limitations or unwillingness, frankly, to be more of an active off-ball guy. It's sort of the James Harden argument, right? It's worth putting the ball in Trae Young's hands because he's a gifted passer, great off the bounce shooter, can draw fouls, do this, do that, but he doesn't really play nice with others, right? If you're not directly getting assisted by Trae Young, then you're going to suffer in many ways because you're playing with Trae Young. And to Derek's point, on the other side of the ball, he is such a toxic defender at the point of attack that drags your entire defense down. Now, I'm not saying that he wouldn't gain from playing next to Joel Embiid rather than
it's not like the Hawks have a bunch of non-defenders.
Yes.
Like, no, look, some of these guys I think were overrated defensively, and that plays a factor into it. But like DeJounte Murray, Sadiq Bey, like Clint Capella, like DeAndre Hunter, these are people who have defensive,
at least decent defenders.
reputations, and they're all in the top 6 of their minutes played. So they certainly, I think, have tried to, and there are some weak defenders in there for sure, Bogdanovich probably being, although he's not like a terrible defender, for them to be 27th, that is in part, and large part, a reflection of Trae Young and his deficiencies. Like if you put Trae Young on the Sixers instead of Maxey, the Sixers would be a substantially worse defense.
Yes. And I think they would be in many ways a worse team because of that. Because look, Tyrese, I'm not going to sit here and be like, hey, he's Scottie Pippen out there or Gary Payton locking people down, right? Like he's definitely got his own defensive limitations, but the Sixers have been able to be a very good team defense with Tyrese on the floor. I think at the very least, you see Tyrese competing and wanting to be good on that end of the floor. And I know, like, we're talking about fan voting, right?
Yep.
Fans are not going to be like, well, Tyrese is a better pick and roll defender or a second side helper or better as being the low man. Like, nobody gives a shit. I understand that. This is a popularity contest. It's that guy makes a lot of highlight reel plays. I get it. You're preaching to the choir on that. And the fans are going to vote for who they're voting for. But I think if you're looking at this and you say, who deserves to be an all-star? I think Tyrese's case is much stronger than Trae's. And as much as people have tried to devalue team success in a lot of individual awards and honors as we take a closer look at sports through stats and things, I still think it matters that Trae Young's team sucks and he has a big, big part to play in why they suck. Like, I think that should matter.
Yeah, and look, I think like you mentioned, this is a popularity contest. This is fans voting. We're still not to any kind of media or coaching selections. And Trae has a track record, a longer track record. He's had bigger moments on the bigger stages in the playoffs than Maxey has to this point. If we were 3 years further into Tyrese Maxey's career with the exact same stats, Maxey gets more votes just because he's been in the public eye for much longer. And I think part of it is also that, Maxey's first 10 games, he was completely dominant. Like 28.4 points, 7 assists, 43% from three. If he would have kept those up, even without the name recognition, he probably gets ahead of some of these guys in the vote. I don't want to say he struggled since, like, over the last 22
He's
games.
come down a bit, though.
25 points, 6 assists, 37% from three. Still incredible numbers, but numbers that are comparable to other guards in the East. So that brings him back to the pack in terms of at least the conversation to where name recognition can be a differentiating factor. And Trae Young individually over the last 20 games has been amazing. 31 points per game, 11.4 assists, 42% from three. He has been real good offensively in terms of his own individual numbers. Now the Hawks have been 8-12 over that 20-game stretch. They're still not winning. We just talked about his defense. That is a factor in them not winning. His turnovers, quite frankly, are a factor in their defense because they get out in transition a lot, and that's another aspect that he controls. But because of the way that those two players have performed of late, and we all suffer, fans included, from recency bias, the fact that Trae Young is putting up monster stat lines and has a name recognition is part of that equation. I don't think Trae Young deserves to be ahead of Tyrese Maxey in the results. It truthfully doesn't matter, though. Only the starters are determined by the fan vote. After that, we get to coaches. And by the way, we are back to the old school format of an East versus West. There are 12 East players, 12 West players. We no longer have the captain format that was done away with.
I will say, I'm a little disappointed about that. I understand, like, people have kind of grown out of it and got sick of the concept, but I enjoyed that whole idea of, like, ooh, who's going to be picked last at the All-Star game. That was a very fun subplot for me.
But, I think the only player who's clearly differentiated himself in terms of this year's result is Tyrese Halliburton. So I enjoy seeing him ahead of the pack in the fan voting as well. I think Maxey has a case with pretty much everyone left on the list. You certainly understand Lillard and his body of work and his recognizability being ahead of in the fan vote. When you start getting into the Mitchell, I think that he's just missed. He's missed 7 or 8 games at this point. His numbers are comparable to Maxey. I think Maxey deserves it more. We just talked about Trae. I always go back to the key is that you have a guard in this conversation. It's wild to think about. If you would have gone back 2 years ago, and this is always sort of like why I don't worry too much about, is someone the third best guard in the East or the fifth? Who cares? You're in the conversation. More importantly, you have a guy who complements Joel Embiid on and off the floor almost perfectly. That being said, I do think Tyrese Maxey deserves to be higher up in this list, even if I get the fact that it's very unlikely and probably doesn't deserve it to be in the top 2.
Yeah, and like I could sit here and be like, well, Philadelphia fans are going to have to show up more like Pacers fans clearly have for Halliburton. But if you go through, and this doesn't impact him starting or not, go through and look at some of the names that he's gotten more votes in. He's got more votes than Kyrie Irving. He's got more votes than Anthony Edwards. Got more votes than Jaylen Brown. got more votes than Kristaps Porzingis having an awesome year. Like, there are a lot of guys having De'Aaron Fox. He's got basically over twice as many votes as he has. And Fox has taken a major shooting leap this year after already being an all-star type guy in years past. So I think he's being recognized for his ascent. It just so happens that the guys in front of him are ultra popular name brand type players that it's going to be tough for him to win in a fan vote. I would say, if you're looking at this, if you're trying to take a positive spin on it, I think Halliburton and Lillard were going to make this team no matter what.
I agree.
I think if those two end up being the two starters, that ends up being the best possible outcome for Maxey just making the team, because I think coaches will look at it and say, I don't want to give Trae Young this or as much consideration when you think about how bad his team has been this year. I think they think more about this guy has impacted winning, and Tyrese has certainly done that on a very good team next to Joel Embiid. So I think coaches are more inclined to reward someone like Tyrese. I'm interested to see how the media vote splits out when we get to that point in a little bit here, and certainly how the players line it up. I think Trae is a sort of player who almost always gets a high percentage of the player vote. He's just for the same reasons fans like him, right? He's tough to guard, really exciting players, had some big moments late in games. I get all that, but I think Tyrese will make it eventually, and I think it's lining up for him in probably the best way possible, if I had to guess.
Yeah. I think it'll be fascinating, like I said, with the the coach vote. Do you end up getting a point where Derek White gets consideration because he is playing so well on the best team in the league? And they like to reward players like that, players who play a role on a winning team and excel in that role. But there's also so many other guards who are having all-star caliber seasons. And that's really what I would say is, like, all of these players that we're talking about are having all-star caliber seasons. It's a numbers game. I do think it's pretty wild that you still only have 12 players per team. I've heard JJ Redick mention this a bunch in the past, but it's the same as it was in the 60s when there was, less than half the teams playing. So to have not expanded the roster at all is pretty wild. It's a real tough to get in there. It should be tough, but I think it could probably be eased a little bit. That being said, I'm just completely tickled with the fact that Tyrese Maxey is in this conversation, that we can both sit here and credibly say he should be an all-star guard for the East. It is a great spot to be in.
Yeah, like if you go and even just the numbers comparisons and say, look, he's basically averaging equal or better
to Dame.
Yeah. To Dame Lillard, who in the summer it was like, what can the Sixers do to move heaven and earth to potentially get Dame? And because Tyrese Maxey is what it would have taken, everyone rightfully was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. But the prospect of getting a Dame level player to play next to Joel Embiid was so exciting. And then Tyrese Maxey has been literally a Dame level player for the first 30 whatever games of the season. That in and of itself is the biggest win of, the first 3 months or whatever it is of the season. And he's doing all this while Joel is, usage is as high as ever, has become even more of a playmaking hub and doing the things that, hey, we're going to give the ball to Tyrese and see what he does as a point guard. Well, Tyrese has been able to toggle between these modes where sometimes he's a off the catch shooter. He's running off of handoffs, or next play, he's a pick and roll passer. He's finding Joel at the elbow. He's getting all the way to the rim, spraying a pass to the corner. So to see him do all of these things, to back that up with the numbers, and frankly, to help Joel win as many games as they have already, that's all a testament to the season that he's having. I think he's getting maybe a little less respect than I would have thought or would have hoped that he would get at this point. But I think that will come in the form of validation from whether it's media, coaches, even players around the league. I think that's coming.
And that comes in future years. Like the work he's doing now will probably be rewarded next year and the following year. It's sort of the way it works. I feel like a lot of these all-star votes, especially when you're talking about the fan vote, tends to be a year or two behind reality because you have to build up that presence, that spotlight, that like we mentioned a lot.
Unless you win the in-season tournament or go to the final, I should say.
I mean, he is also putting up 25 and 12. So there's
true.
that too. But, I think, I think in future years he will have a much better chance, even if his case might be the same. And I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be doing this. Like, the confidence I have that he will figure it out in future years is so astronomically high. And he's only 23. Like, it's wild to think about that he is competing against some of these more established players at this age. Given it's the first year of him being a primary initiator, it's just it's been a wild season. It really has.
Yeah. Well, you know what else is wild, Derek? How much money Rocket
waste.
Money has been saving you over
Really
the
has.
last month or so?
Legitimately 2 subscriptions. No BS on that. They have made me found ways that I am wasting money, and we all want to make sure that we get the most out of our money, which makes endorsing Rocket Money easy to do, as there's a very real chance that you are like me and that you will save money by using Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills. You can see all your subscriptions in one place, and if you see something you don't want, you can cancel it with a tap, and you never have to get on the phone with customer service. They'll even try to get you a refund for the last couple of months of wasted money and negotiate to lower your bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is take a picture of your bill, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 per year, with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/PHLY. That's rocketmoney.com/PHLY. rocketmoney.com/PHLY.
And once you save that money, guys, I need you to go right down to the GameTime app, because that's the best place to buy tickets to your favorite events, where you don't have to stress about prices. You don't have to stress about availability. Fast and easy way to buy tickets for any event that you could think of. And guys, GameTime is the best place to go for last minute deals. You don't have to plan months in advance. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. So if you see a game on the calendar coming up and it's Tyrese Maxey against one of these guards that's been put ahead of him in All-Star voting, you think, hey, maybe this is a Maxey revenge game. You can figure that out the day of the game, the hours leading into the game, without having to worry about prices or the last minute deals that you can get on the GameTime app, because they have exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the GameTime guarantee means you always get the best price. Find tickets in the same section and row for less. GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gotta love that GameTime guarantee. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for good reason. Those tickets get sent directly to your phone after you buy them, so you never have to dig through your email to find them. And you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, you are set. So snag the tickets without the stress with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I guess the other thing I was curious about, Derek, looking through the rest of the results, maybe non-Sixers division, what jumped out at you other than Ja Morant playing like 4 games and getting 300,000 All-Star votes?
Oh, hold on. Let me pull back up the results, because we looked at these about 5 minutes before, not 5 minutes, probably about 45 minutes before we came on, and I have forgotten most of them. Let's see. I mean, honestly, Jokic being third in the front court in the West, I get it's a popularity contest, but Kevin Durant hasn't exactly been on the court the entire time, and has won a couple of MVPs, so him being third is always odd. Let's see. Harden being fourth, I think will probably, and fourth in guards in the West, will probably anger some people listening to this show. He has been really good of late, but
big reason that they're actually looking like a good and competent team lately.
I mean, Ant being sixth, we talked about this beforehand, but Ant being sixth in guards in the West. Come on, Minnesota. Like, you've got to stuff that box.
Even that, like, I know I was saying Philadelphia's got to show up for Tyrese. Some of this is just, it's a national appeal voting process, sure, right? And I thought Ant-Man is like, he's a really exciting player to watch. The team's profile has risen because they've been really good to start the year. And he's the number 1 offensive option. Play through him, gets all the comparisons to all the great scorers of the past, has some insane highlight dunks and things like that. So I thought he was, I mean, if he's not a shoo-in to start, he's at least, top 3. But I get it. Luka and Steph at the top are hard to get them off of their corners, so to speak. And then Shea, who's having an MVP level year in Oklahoma City, guy, or at least the guy who's getting real consideration for MVP.
Yep.
Third. So it's hard to break into that group. I mean,
How about-
even Harden is like a distant fourth. He's
Yeah.
500,000 votes behind Shea.
LaMelo being within like 130,000 votes of Jalen Brunson. LaMelo's fine player. He's played 15 games this year. That's not an all-star being within 15.
The Zoomers love him, man.
Yeah.
He is like
but being that close to someone like Brunson, who is leading an offense like that, being ahead of someone like Derek White, who's being a perfect role player, I would certainly not agree with that voting result. But I guess you mentioned, it might have his legion of fans, but
yeah, it's look, a lot of the guys who are at the top of these, different voting categories all have insane legions of what we would call stans, like people who just show up for them no matter what.
as we learned with Harden.
Harden's got a lot of diehards. I respect the hell out of them because even when he vomits all over himself in a big moment, it's nobody else's fault, or it's everybody else's fault and not James's. So I hope to breed that kind of loyalty in my own life. I don't know that that's happened yet. I think the people I surround myself with tend to say that I'm an asshole when I am one. So I kind of prefer that to the undying loyalty that some of these guys get. But yeah, I guess Ant's got longer to go. I figured though, after, he's playing on Team USA, all that. That's the one that really shocked me. Yeah. Got his own signature shoe now. Yeah. I guess that's the playing in Minnesota tax. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I have too many more thoughts on that one. How about you?
No, I think I'm all starred out. Only so many takeaways you can have from one round of fan voting, I would say.
Yeah. We did sort of tease this the other day, though. There has obviously Kelly came in, filled in the DeAnthony Melton role in the starting lineup. There are a lot of, I think, people who are interested in seeing that as a potential lineup going forward, specifically as a lineup that might have a little more versatility in some playoff matches. What are your overall thoughts on whether or not that is viable?
Well, I think it's viable. The question for me is, do you need to do anything right now, right? Like the argument has to be it's clearly superior to what they are doing and have right now, right? Because it's one thing. Actually, there was a story today about the LA Lakers where Darvin Ham is allegedly losing the locker room there. And one of the big reasons behind that reportedly is because he has shuffled the lineup so much and he's trying so many different combinations. And part of why they're doing that is they just haven't been good enough, right? They've been a very mediocre. They're now below 500. I think they're flirting with being out of the play-in. And that's the sort of team that you can justify saying, look, guys have been hurt in and out of the lineup. We haven't found the one group, the 1, 5, and bench unit that works. And that's when you start searching for, okay, let's try somebody else here. Let's move this guy to the bench. I think the problem that Nick Nurse would run into is like, all right, now you're moving into like overthinking it territory, right? Because I know that DeAnthony is not exactly the most popular Sixers player. In fact, I would say my appreciation for DeAnthony is several levels above like average Sixers fan, if I had to guess. And that's not to say that I'm right and you're wrong. It's just to say that the things I value are different than average Sixers fan. And so to me, you look at all the splits, you see the Sixers starting lineup for this season is just absolutely bulldozing teams when they're healthy. What is it? You probably have the numbers in front of you, Derek.
It is absurd. It is a plus 33 net rating in 467 possessions with a 137.3 offensive rating that falls in the 100th percentile and a 103.9 defensive rating, which falls in the 99th percentile.
So when you have a starting lineup that is blitzing teams that badly, and look, I get it. They were able to pad some of that with the stretch against the Detroits, the Washingtons, the Atlanta Hawks, who we just talked about. I get it. So that number is probably not as good or as high as it seems through that. But even if you took like 10 points of the net rating off, that's still like best lineup on a title team level good. And so we're not just talking about, hey, the starting lineup with Melton in it is pretty good, but you could see some debate. it is like
legitimate,
the single best lineup in the entire NBA, at least up through 30 whatever games of the season. And we'll see it borne out over a larger sample. But I think that's the toughest part for me. It's not that I don't see value in, hey, Kelly might work better against certain matchups, bigger teams with bigger wings that they need more of that big switchability, where D'Anthony is more, backcourt switchability. I think it's really hard to look at D'Anthony or anybody in that lineup in the eyes and be like, yeah, that thing that is absolutely dominant, we're going to stop doing that temporarily.
Yeah, right. If this was a lineup that was struggling, sure. And you could honestly even make a case if we're preparing for the playoffs, maybe you're preparing for Boston and the size they have on the wings, you just want to put more size on the court. Sure, I can get that. But I think a couple things. First of all, like you said, changing a starting lineup that it's not that they've been just working. They've been arguably the best lineup in the league, and being like, we're going to change just because you had one good game with Kelly in the starting lineup. Like, that's just not going to happen. And I even dove into it because the starting lineup with Oubre in it has been good as well, but it's only been 63 possessions. It's been a much, 1/10 of the sample size. So I looked at it. I looked at Melton in the starting lineup, or Melton in lineups with Embiid and Maxey, and Kelly in lineups with Embiid and Maxey. You get a much better sample size there. 508 possessions with Kelly, plus 6.2 net rating. That's good. But with Embiid, Maxey, and Melton, it's been a plus 15.4. So I think there is a lot of data and evidence that Melton is a really good fit around your two franchise players. And I think it makes sense because he is, for as good as Kelly is and as good as he's been this year, and the arguments you can make about size defensively, I think Melton is a much better connective piece on offense in terms of just spacing the floor. Even though Kelly can shoot, I think Melton is a better catch and shoot player, especially when you start talking about taking contested shots. I think his shot doesn't break down as much, even if it is a little bit streaky, and just a better decision maker, a better passer. I think there's reasons why he would fit better when you don't want a player to necessarily take over the game. You just want him to fit within the flow of an offense. I think Melton does that pretty well. And I do think there are some matchups that you could worry about the lack of size on the perimeter, and you would want to get another 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" foot kind of wing in there. But I think when we start talking about that, there's a very real chance they make a trade that changes this equation anyway. So I don't really want to worry about that. And if your argument is that you should start testing this out so that you know what you have for the playoffs, I'll agree with you in late February and March. Sure, let's experiment a little bit. But I don't think it's going to get to the point where how well Kelly plays with this lineup is going to make me go, no, they shouldn't pursue another wing at the trade deadline. So at this point, why change what's not broken?
Yeah, I mean, really, the only reason to me right now that you would consider bumping Kelly up is if you think that there's a problem in the locker room because Kelly's not starting, which a guy on a minimum contract who has seen his star fall as far as Kelly has, I don't think he's really in a position to upset the apple cart.
Yeah, one of his primary goals this year has to be don't be a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying that he has or is going to do that at all. I think I actually said yesterday or 2 days ago on the show, I think one of the things that I personally have been happiest with Kelly is that he's been about the right things, both on and off the floor, saying the right things, doing the right things. So look, if Kelly was a guy making more money and him and D'Anthony were in some kind of Cold War where it was like, oh, I can't believe he's starting over me, or it was becoming a problem. But I don't see that happening. I've seen no evidence that any of these guys are really thinking that way. If they are, they have not shown it at all. It has not come up around media. It doesn't, if you look when they're in the huddle, when they're on the floor together, there are no signs of things like that. So I think these guys don't really care. And that being the case, just leave it alone. It is one of the things that something that I think was slightly underrated with Doc Rivers that certainly has carried. Oh,
careful.
I said this many times last year. When something works, don't go away from it. That was one thing that
Doc
I always
would run
gave.
the same play 6 times in a row.
And Joel's favorite thing that Doc taught him to do is when they would run a play and the play would work, you'd see Joel come down the floor and just go, run it again and run the
to be
same
fair,
exact
Nick's
play.
done, like, how many games did we see that empty side pick and roll where they
Yes.
just pounded and pounded?
Right.
and
But
pounded?
so all I'm saying is good coaches generally understand if I have a good thing, there's no reason to mess with it. Like Nick is a tinkerer. Nick likes to experiment. Nick likes to do lots of different things. But when you have a starting lineup that might be the single best lineup in the NBA, I don't know that that's actually true once it gets down to playoff time, whatever. But when it's winning you lots of regular season games, I will also say this. They have, as much as the net rating is padded by beating Detroit and Washington, whatever, this is a lineup that has beaten Oklahoma City, that's beaten Minnesota, that's beaten Boston, has beaten all the teams other than, I guess, Milwaukee that they've played that are at the top of the pecking order. They've got at least one win against all of them, and that's with this group. So no reason to go crazy with changes.
What you're saying by not disrupting what's working and by the risk of making a change in the lineup, maybe we should not bring Devon back tomorrow night.
Nah, I think Devon has been a seamless fit with what we have going on. But
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just making sure we're on the same page.
If the chatters feel otherwise, they can certainly weigh in. Not that I think the company will be taking advice from them on whether to retain Devon for employment or not. But
Dave P., let us know in the chat what we should do with Devon.
He did say, okay, I agree. But
we don't know what to. It could have been
I don't know what that's to. It could be Devon getting out of here. But
we're just giving
we
Devon
love you,
grief.
Devon, if you hear this later. Anyway, in the meantime, I would love to tell you guys about our friends, and you guys can get to hear me say Bagels about 15 times in one ad read, which I know everyone loves. Bagels and Co. offers huge Brooklyn-style bagels, the biggest ones you can get in the area. They are made in Philadelphia. I eat bagels several days a week for breakfast. Bagels and Co. offers an average of around 15 to 20 types of bagels that rotate seasonally. They just had a Christmas themed bagel. I don't know what they're cooking up for, if there's like a Valentine's Day and Easter, anything that's coming up, but they're always worth checking out. They mix up the flavors. They got great variety. And if you're a cream cheese guy, I will not eat a bagel with anything other than cream cheese as the spread. They have 30 different flavors of cream cheese that also rotate throughout the year. It's worth mentioning Bagels and Co. do themed cream cheeses for all the local sports teams. I know the team on my sweatshirt, the Eagles, is not in good standing right now, but they do have a Sixers themed cream cheese, so worth checking out if you head down there. And just as important as that variety is the affordability you get at Bagels & Co. because they've kept their prices down so that you can be an everyday customer, not just someone who comes in for a weekend splurge. You know, sometimes you get a bacon, egg, and cheese somewhere and you think, oh, I'm a real fancy lad. You can go to Bagels & Co. every single day for an affordable price that's better than the name brand chain competitors. And by the way, they offer premium coffee at a superior price to most national brands and chains, so it can be a one-stop shop for your morning. For the best Brooklyn-style bagels made right here in Philly, head to www.thebagelsandco.com/store-locator to find the closest Bagels & Co. near you.
Got a few responses in the chat. Will says that he loves Devon. So, Bree, if you can let Vince know that he should re-enable Devon's key card, we will allow
him back in the
studio.
building after his 2 days off here. No, it's to be clear to everyone listening at home, Derek and I love Devon, and he's taking care of his own business.
I feel like people at this point should know. Like, if
I think so.
If we're making fun of you, it means we like you. If we're quiet about you, that's when you have to start getting worried. I feel like people probably picked up on that.
Probably, but we do get new people in here every day, so
we are only 80% of the asshole that we portray ourselves as. Yeah,
80% might be generous. But, I do have all these mailbag questions in front of us. I don't know if you want to go further down the lineup rabbit hole. I know you have you had a lot of numbers and stats prepared, but
no, I mean, I think, like, look, I understand the sentiment that, like, someone like Boston, you're going to want more size on the perimeter. I don't disagree with that at all. I just think when Melton is in the starting lineup with Melton is playing this well, and when there's a big trade deadline that could shake things up anyway, there's no reason to shake the boat 4 weeks before the team could be changed.
And I would say it reflects well on Kelly that it's at least worth talking about because he has avoided so many of those pitfalls that you and I talked about when they signed him and when we were looking ahead to the full season. Because part of the reason I think you put someone like Melton in the starting five on top of the defensive stuff is that he's pretty happy in a relatively low usage role, quick trigger shooter, all that stuff. And Kelly has, for the most part, he has not been an off script, force up shots, do ridiculous stuff guy when he's on the floor. For the most part, there are still but I would say his occasional bad mid-range pull-ups or the tightly contested three are semi-comparable to D'Antoni throwing his body at 4 people in the paint and taking the worst layup attempt you've ever seen. It's people don't look at it the same way because it's from an area of the floor that I think like Nick Nurse wants to attack more than the mid-range, but they're kind of in the same bucket when you look at the success rate that D'Antoni has on layup attempts. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, it's not been that different. And I think that's not a criticism of D'Antoni. I think that's more Kelly has been more of the guy that I think they've needed than I was expecting him to be coming into the season. And I think it's a great thing for the team ultimately that Kelly's been good enough that if they do need to make lineup changes against a Boston or a team with, bigger wings and they need to put Kelly in a bigger role, I feel at least relatively confident.
Well, I'm glad you feel competent.
I do feel competent
most days. I give you a lot of grief, but you are at least competent. I will give you that.
That's what I'm. Yeah. As long as the checks keep clearing, that's all that matters. So Kelly, you can stick in the lineup, and I think you can feel confident that he'll do the things they need him to do and bring at least a slightly different dimension than D'Antoni. That's a great thing for this team.
Yeah, I agree.
So, do we want to hit the mailbag?
Let's hit it.
Our good friend Michael Weber asks, shouldn't Cov play more? Seems like Nurse doesn't love or trust him.
First of all, I love you, Michael. He's always been a big fan of our work. I appreciate the chance to talk to him, but you clearly do not listen to this show enough because I feel like we complain about Cov not playing all the time. And yes, we agree 100%. I would love to see Cov play more. I don't know why he keeps falling out of the rotation in various places. It could be that I just completely overrate him, but I'm pretty confident in what he brings defensively. He shoots it well enough to at least space the floor. He's chaos at times on defense in the best ways possible. He's still among the league leaders in steals per possession and steals per minute and deflections. I would love to see him play more, yes.
So I'm going to play brief devil's advocate. I agree. We're still in agreement that he should play more. I wonder, has Cov seemed more hesitant as a shooter to you than he was in years past? Certainly than when he was here the first time, because I think he shot way more than people wanted him to at times.
Right. But I think at that point, I don't want to say all fans, but a lot of fans weren't comfortable with high volume 3-point shooting at that level. I think a lot of people still viewed a 36% look from 3 as a bad shot. I don't necessarily think that is. He might not have quite as quick of a trigger, but I wouldn't say he hesitates that much. I do think he now is mildly more comfortable, or you might say competent, in his attacking closeout than he was the first time here. So maybe that gives him a little bit of he's actually has a decision to make rather than just launch at 3. But he's still, I bet you if you'll look, his 3s per minute and 3-point rate are pretty good, I feel like.
I just think anecdotally, it seems like there are shots that I would have not even had to guess what he was going to do. He'd just take the shot. And now he's stepping out of more of those. And you're right that he's a better attacker now. So maybe that factors into it. But I wonder how much of it is that. Like, they already have other record scratch players, Tobias, that we have to talk about and think about and factor into the rotation at all times. I also wonder how much of it is wanting... Not that you and I love Marcus Morris as a secondary creator all the time.
It's way down.
Is it way down?
5.5 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. He was up in the 10 range when he was here the first time.
Yeah, so the numbers say that. I guess I'm on to something
Fair
here.
Point.
So I wonder if it's a combination of that, and I think a guy like Marcus Morris just has more off the dribble juice. And as you and I are saying, hey, they need defense and what Cov brings and all that, and there have absolutely been nights that he brings that. I wonder if Nick Nurse is hearing the other side of us where we're like, could you just put like anybody who can dribble on the floor?
Yeah.
And so Marcus can get them out of some some tough possessions that I think Cov and frankly a lot of other guys on the roster really can't.
Yeah. But no, going back to Weber's question. Yeah.
I think we're both in agreement, and most people are in agreement he should play a bit more. Okay, here's a fun one that this could be a headline for a show, but it was the big topic of the morning on social media. What would a trade for LeBron look like? That's asked by Andrew Prosser, because the Lakers right now are in absolute shambles and trying to figure out if... Here's my thing. One, and Derek would agree with me on this, LeBron is not asking for a trade, and he's not being traded.
And they're not trading him,
This is a purely hypothetical exercise.
I mean, the contract to match is obviously Tobias.
It's got to be Tobias.
Yep, it's got to be Tobias. This is such a weird hypothetical because there's just no chance of it happening. I mean, how many first-round picks are we talking?
Could you do it for 2? Like, is it...
Again, it's weird hypothetical because LeBron means so much more than just what he does on the court, and there's no chance of the Lakers. Like, two's not going to do it, but you don't want to give up 3, but it all doesn't matter because it's not going to happen.
All right. There was a spin-off question. I don't remember who asked it. I believe somebody else asked the question of if LeBron had come to Philadelphia when he decided to go to LA.
Yeah, I saw that.
How different does the last 5 years
That
play
was the
out?
summer of Colangelo, right? That was
Correct.
2018.
Yes.
2018. Yeah. So that was before the Jimmy, Tobias, all of those mistakes. The Jimmy trade wasn't a mistake. The second Jimmy trade.
The first Jimmy trade was for all the grief Elton Brand gets, he nailed that one. That was a great trade.
And that was before. No, that would have been after Bridges. But maybe you then keep Bridges because you don't need to. Well, no, but that was a draft night. That was before.
I think Bridges would have gotten traded through the LeBron vortex.
Well, not only that, but like that trade happened before the summer of his signing anyway. I think they win I'll tell you what, LeBron on his team, they don't lose to that freaking Hawks disaster.
No. Now, here's my question. Is Joel still on the team at that point?
I mean...
So remember the context of LeBron potentially coming here. It was the clutch mafia.
Sure.
Him and Ben. Ben was his protege.
And that front office adored Ben because he was their own.
Correct.
Yep.
So do you end up at a point where it's LeBron and Ben and Joel gets moved?
I don't think so. I think LeBron cares more about winning than he does about clutch. And I think
agree.
LeBron's a smart enough player to realize that big 7'2" dude who nobody in the world can defend is more valuable than this guy who, nobody has to defend and is clogging up the paint for me. I think he'd come to that conclusion.
Do they win more than a title?
I mean, I think anytime you start talking about winning multiple titles, a lot has to go right. But I certainly think they have a chance. Look, we've seen imperfect teams, and that's what makes sort of this era of Sixers basketball so frustrating. We've seen imperfect teams get to NBA Finals from the East. Like the Celtics offense almost always breaks down at various points in the playoffs, not the entire run, as we saw in Game 7 of the conference semifinals last year, but at various points, their offense becomes predictable and stale. The Heat have always been a team that wins 43 games and somehow finds their way in the NBA Finals. How many finals trips have those two teams combined for since LeBron went out west?
Which two teams are you talking about?
Celtics and Heat.
The Heat have 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Celtics have that one. So, I think there's a road open for the Sixers winning multiple.
I think that's fair.
I mean, and if you set the over-under at 1.5, I'd probably take the under just because it's tough for any team to win multiple titles in a 5-year stretch. But they certainly have a chance.
Here's the other thing. If you get LeBron and he commits, remember that was the summer that Kawhi was on the table and the Spurs said, we want one of either Joel or Ben. What if they had LeBron, Kawhi, and Joel Embiid on the same team at the same time? You imagine?
Well, and that's always been like the what if that nobody really talks about because
it's the one I bring up every single time I have an opportunity to do so.
But like, what if the Sixers actually trade Ben at the apex of his value rather than let that asset deteriorate into nothing, into being a negative contract? There was a lot of value on the trade market for Ben, and that was the.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, I don't think Derek and I believe that the Sixers are in the market for LeBron James, because nobody is in the market for LeBron James.
He's in
he
LA.
will never get traded unless he specifically asks for it, and he's not going to ask for it. I think he is aware, for many reasons, of how that would look for him to be forcing a trade.
Yep, I agree.
Actually, brief aside from the mailbag, because this has come up. Woj has said now publicly and reported this, that there is no market for Zach LaVine. So I don't know if that means we need to take any kind of victory lap on everything we've reported on the Sixers' interest in Zach LaVine, but I did want to at least bring that up, that the guy who I think I trust more than anything, or anyone, I should say, with NBA reporting is like, yeah, nobody wants that guy. I do think if I were handicapping it, the Lakers are the one team that I'm like, I think they are.
Well, I mean, you just talked about
because of the LeBron,
they have to be desperate.
The coach, all that. I think there's a chance that they go after LaVine. Again, clutch mafia, so you never know. Rich Paul, by the way, was in the building for that Bulls game the other night that the Sixers played. If you want to try to do the like It's Always Sunny, connecting 15 different dots all over the map. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up while I was thinking about it.
I agree.
We have a question from Flanatico, who asks, would Caruso cost more than one unprotected first-round pick?
I mean, this might be the question of the trade deadline, because I think the more I think about it, the more I'm getting on board with targeting specific role players who have years left on their contract. Caruso only has one, but I think there's two reasons for that. One, it's going to be exceptionally tough to keep 3 stars around in the double apron CBA, and when some of those trade restrictions, when you start talking about trade restrictions, some of these haven't kicked in yet. Like, you can't aggregate salaries. If you're like, it gets real tough to build teams if you hit that double apron. So unless there's a darn near perfect piece, and I think this is probably influencing the Zach LaVine market quite a bit, unless there's a darn near perfect third piece to give a huge contract to, maybe it makes more sense to target some players like a Bogdanovich, like a Caruso, someone in that ilk, who not only has another year left on his contract in Caruso's case, or is it 2 or 3 years left on Bogdanovich's case? Either way, not only do they have some time left, but you now have a chance to go out there and use, because I think there's going to be a depressed market for some of these mid-tier starters. Use that to your advantage and try to build just an Embiid and Maxey and a whole bunch of good role players sort of team. I think that might end up being at least a conversation to have, especially if the perfect third star doesn't come on the market. But is that price going to come down? Because I think 2 firsts is I don't want to say a complete, it's pretty much a non-starter for Caruso. But I also think that, they're going to play it like they have time, like they have another year on his contract. But as we've seen here at this trade deadline, if you wait to try to do this at next year's trade deadline, Caruso is going to have significantly less value. So maybe that ends up being one legitimate pick and one pick that's so protected that it's not going to convey a fake first-round pick. Maybe a good second, who knows? But I think that price needs to come down, or at least, like I said, have so many protections that the second one is a moot point, because I'm not sure I'd be comfortable giving up 2 to basically make Caruso the headliner of your trade deadline.
Yeah, I think the more pressing question then, would it cost more? Is it worth more than that, right? Like, for all intents and purposes, Caruso's price is multiple picks right now. Right. At least that's what the Bulls are projecting. Can you move them off of that corner? Yeah. I guess and we'll see. Like, they had that period of competitiveness with Vooch out on top of LaVine. They've come back to earth a bit. So I guess we'll see what happens. I do want to point out, I don't know how to pronounce, I think it's Haidar, maybe. Is that? We have someone from Iceland with a super chat. Believe their name is Haidar. Derek, if you want to take a crack at the full name there.
No, I'm good.
I will. Good. But thank you very much, coming all the way from Iceland with a super chat. Haidar, I hope I'm pronouncing your...
Iceland is very high on my list of places I
have not been. My wife has been, and she said it was absolutely gorgeous.
Go. So, and especially as someone who likes photography and drone videography, I need to get to Iceland.
So the super chat in question: could Philly take Ben back to add value in a trade with the Nets? Would they?
Well,
could they? Of course they could. Would they? Fuck no.
There was also a mailbag question, basically if the cost of getting Mikal Bridges was adding Ben Simmons to the contract, would you do it?
That's a little bit more interesting, I guess. But even still, I know that Joel has opened the door with the comments he made. Was it on Tyrese's podcast, essentially saying that he wished it would have worked? And
Ben's
blah,
left
blah,
the door
blah.
open, saying that
Ben's left the door open. Look, man, I have no interest, and I think he is a fundamentally broken basketball player. And as much as like, if the Mikal part comes in somehow, maybe you could talk your way into it. But I think you're bringing up the CBA, Derek. One of the repercussions of that is like you're going to have Joel, him, Tyrese's extension, and then what Mikal is already making. You're going to be a second apron team and have absolutely no ability to make moves, essentially, I think, if I'm doing the napkin math in my head. So, yeah, I just don't see a path to doing that.
So here's my counter to that. First of all, max contracts are changing, right? So like Pascal Siakam is eligible to sign a 4-year, $200 million contract extension. A supermax would be $300 million. You're talking about $60 million max contracts coming up. Ben Simmons only has 1 year left on his deal after this one at $40 million per bargain. And then Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, real bargain. That makes Tobias Harris's contract look like the best contract in the league.
And then Mikal Bridges is 2 years left at about $24 million per year. So you're paying the two of those players $65 million, about a max contract slot. You only have 1 year left on Ben Simmons. The following year, you'd have Bridges on a very below market contract. I could talk myself into that.
Oh,
you would be in absolute cap second apron hell for 1 year. That's true. But Bridges is just such a perfect fit that if you can get him for 2 years at $24 million, that would offset some of the penalty of taking on Ben Simmons. But then you would have what is Bridges, 27-year-old who fits your core two perfectly for the foreseeable future. You figure you'd probably want to stay around here a long time because they could contend and it's his hometown. Obviously, we have a co-host who have a little more information on that, even if you wouldn't discuss it on air. Yeah, I'd do it. I would do it. Next year, you would be in cap hell, and it would be very tough, but I would do it. Yep.
I can't do the Ben experience again.
Bring Ben home, baby.
I don't want to hear about nerve impingements. I don't want to hear, oh, look, he's ramping up. He's ready for
home.
Dude, they had to put out, I think it was Brian Lewis at the Post put out a report that was like, hey, by the end of this road trip, he's going to be able to play 2-on-2. Like, hey, let's throw a goddamn parade. He's able to play 2-on-2 again. And this is like, his body is failing him. Prior to that, I think he mentally was not prepared to be the level of player that he needed to be. I think now he's shown, like, look, he's gone from was the guy here, failed at that. He had about as much star cover as he could have with the Nets, with Durant and Kyrie. And if you want to say that the team was a shit show and he was still hurt, whatever, like, okay, I get that. But was failing miserably with those guys, is clearly a shell of himself as a player. And now on a no pressure team, he can't stay healthy enough to play. And when he's healthy enough to play, he's no good. So like, I don't know. I can't do it because then I'll have the people who I had to argue with for 3 years telling them that this guy sucks or is not as good as he needs to be, at least, coming back in like, oh, Ben's back. It doesn't need a jumper. It doesn't need this. And I cannot go through that again. For
Simo the Savage, baby.
My
Bring him
own
home.
personal sanity.
I mean, maybe he can buy the house from Nick Castellanos back. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Do you think Castellanos has done anything with that room, or is it still like it's like the haunted wing of the house? Just has the green Simo the Savage neon, and the kids aren't allowed back there. It's like the where you keep the fine china in an old person's house. I don't know how that works.
Bring them home. Absolutely.
I am extremely good on that. We did have.
You would have to include like every expiring you have. Like it would have to be Tobias.
Yeah.
You would have to have. Other than again, 25% at that number is pretty big. But Tobias, Morris, Rocco, like all of them.
Please, God, no. Please. I would rather Robert Covington play point guard than watch Ben Simmons play any more basketball.
Here's
for
the thing,
76ers.
though, with the way Ben Simmons' career is trending, you don't have to watch him play basketball. He doesn't play basketball anymore. Give me Bridges.
Luckily, it's never going to happen. So, Furious has another super chat for us. He says, with LaVine value being so low, does it make sense to get Caruso and LaVine, and do we have enough to make it happen? So, I mean,
I mean-
piggybacking off of the no market thing, yeah, that is one way that if you really want Caruso and you're willing to say
So, like, what would you say? Like Caruso and LaVine for Tobias,
multiple
Cov,
firsts
and 2 firsts.
I think you could talk me into that.
I really don't want LaVine.
I don't either, but
We just spoke about how, like,
at
in
least
order to
LaVine
give-
plays basketball, unlike Ben Simmons.
Yeah, but if you're a Bulls fan right now, is that a good thing? Or, like, I think they might be celebrating that he's not playing basketball. Look, I think LaVine is super talented. Offensively, I think he could be a fit. But $40+ million per year. And look, I just mentioned, like, contracts are going to be in the $60 million range for maxes. That's not going to be the worst contract in the world in a couple of years when the cap continues to escalate. But I have to believe in them to get myself into double apron hell. And I just don't believe in him. And look, Caruso's
So you go into the double apron for Ben, but you won't
for 1
a
year, yes. For one, if LaVine only had 1 year left on his contract, yes.
Oh,
But he doesn't. He has 4.
how
right?
long is
4?
my contract for again? When can I stop talking to you about? I'm just. Oh, our friend from Iceland said I need to see the jump shot videos again. I take back everything nice that I said about the country of Iceland and about you. I'm just kidding, buddy. I know it's sarcastic. I'm sorry. I'm so fixated on the
You're being
saying Ben
mad at
would-
me. No, I get it.
Yeah.
If you were talking like maybe, look, I like Caruso a lot. LaVine's value is so depressed. If it drops down to LaVine and Caruso for 1 first-round pick, tell me what the other options are out there. Maybe. I really don't want to have that LaVine contract for 4 years. I just don't want it.
I think that's
And by the way,
completely fair.
Yeah.
Because look, there are definitely nights where I look at this team and I see how few people can dribble, and I'm like, man, it'd be nice to have a real ball handler. And then I go on to spotrack.com and I look at the contract, and I'm like, they definitely don't need that contract on the books for the next 4 years. So, look, guys, I feel like a lot of the comments after every show are, do you guys actually like anyone in the league? And it's like, yeah, but none of them are available right now, at least publicly known to be available.
Here's the one thing that gives me pause on LaVine. And I think I'm pretty firmly in the I don't want that contract stance, but he has mostly played his career for 2 dipshit organizations.
Yes.
Being around a functional, it's so weird. Trust me, it is so, I feel uncomfortable saying this, but being around a functional organization like the Sixers, imagine saying that a couple years ago when their GM was getting fired for burner
Sounds like
accounts.
Mad Libs to me.
But imagine like LaVine around a functional organization, a stable organization. Again, it just feels so weird talking about, with Joel Embiid as a focal point. Could he alter his game and become the best version of himself? If you can truthfully have enough people that have been around Zach LaVine for the entirety of his career or the majority of his career, talk me into that stance, I might be able to get behind it. Because it is something where, like, he has the skill sets to be a second and third banana, to, go between those 2 roles, to be what they need. You just need him to buy into that role, buy in defensively, especially off ball where he's a complete space cadet, and, be willing to take a backseat when that's necessary, and he can be worth that contract. I do think he has the skills to be worth that contract. Especially, and I actually just looked up, it's only 3 years left, although it's a little higher than I thought. It's between basically about an average of 45 or so million over those 3 years. It's a big number. There will be a lot of big numbers signed in the next couple of years, but I have to believe in him more, and I would just need someone to tell me, yes, he will buy into that role. I don't know if he would.
I mean, he would probably say he'll buy into it, but
of course he would. Yeah.
Whether he actually does it, to your point, is the $45 million a year question. And anyone who doesn't want to take that risk, I get, because as we talk about all the time on this show, I think if you make this trade, you can't get Simo the Savage back. The group's overall cohesion this year and the singular focus that a lot of guys that, frankly, we were not high on coming into the year have bought into this vision. And on the one hand, you say, well, maybe Nick could get a LaVine or one of these other potential trade targets to buy into that vision as well. On the other hand, you say, well, they already have all these guys bought into it, and they're winning tons of games, and they're capable of beating the best teams in the league when they line them up. So, like, why bother taking a giant future risk, let alone the short-term risk on the deal, when you can just make, smaller moves around the fringes in the rotation, add guys to an already strong rotation with 2 stars at the top of it. I understand that. I even agree with it. I think at this point, if you're asking me if I'd rather do a couple small moves or trade for LaVine, I don't think it's even close. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what they end up doing, but we're going to have 17 versions of this conversation between now and whatever, February. I don't even know the date this year. It's February what? 8th. Look at you. You're on top of it, Derek. I think that's probably enough for today, though, right?
Simo the Savage, baby. Bring him home.
Simo the Savage is not coming home, but you know who we appreciate for being here? All of you, ladies and gentlemen. Hypothetical Man, Puppas, Dave. We got 2 Daves, Dave P. and Dave Doer. 3-time Furious, who had a super chat once again today. Cousin Grace, Puppas from overseas. We got Sean. We got Randy. My guy Will. Gavin. I know Sal tried to slip in his stupid Imagine Dragons joke at the beginning of the show. So I see you, buddy. Best believe. We also had Haidar. I hope that's how you say your name. From Iceland today. First time I'm seeing you. That was great. Martian Lynch, Remo, Ash. Love the gang being here each and every day. As I tell you at the end of every show, if you have not already, can you hit that subscribe button for me? Hit that bell icon for me so that you get notifications each and every time we go live on this show. And if you hit the thumbs up button on this specific video, it would give me all the warm and fuzzy feelings inside. Derek is a black hole of emotion, so I don't know if it would do the same for him, but it certainly helps out the channel quite a bit. We will be back post-game after the Knicks tomorrow. We got another post-game show on Saturday night. See you guys then.
Simo the Savage.
We all silly like the mayor.